All right, so get it. We're diving deep today into a story about Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Oh, yeah.
The UFC champ.
Right.
And, he gets kicked off a plane.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a story that really gets you thinking, right?
Yeah.
You've got this guy, one of the greatest MMA fighters ever.
Arguably.
Undefeated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he ends up getting booted off an Alaska Airlines flight.
It's crazy. It is.
It's a situation where everything just spirals.
Yeah.
Like miscommunication,
Yeah.
potential bias, you name it.
Yeah.
And it really kind of lays bare the whole complex world of air travel. Today's world.
Yeah, for sure.
Like all these things we take for granted.
Yeah.
And then something like this happens.
Exactly. So just to set the scene for people who might not know all the details.
Yeah.
Khabib's on this flight from Vegas to LA. Pretty standard stuff.
Yes.
Sitting in the exit row.
Mm-hmm.
But then things get interesting when a flight attendant starts questioning his ability to help out if there's an emergency.
Yeah. And what really makes this so compelling is that we're not just talking about some hypothetical situation here.
Right.
We've got actual video footage of what went down.
Oh, wow.
Filmed by another passenger.
Oh, wow.
It's raw. It's real.
Yeah.
And it really kind of shines a light on that whole power dynamic,
Uh-huh.
that exists between passengers and the flight crew.
Yeah, it's almost like this little microcosm of
Totally.
these bigger societal issues.
It is.
Like how quickly people make judgments
Right.
and how easily misunderstandings can blow up.
Yeah, and the fact that Khabib is this prominent figure,
Yeah.
right, and a Muslim man at that,
Yeah.
that just adds a whole other layer of complexity to the whole thing.
Definitely.
I mean, some people argue that,
Yeah.
his appearance or maybe his accent might have played a role
Yeah.
in how the flight attendant saw him, even though it was clear he could speak English.
Right. Yeah, it definitely makes you think about implicit bias
Absolutely.
and how it can creep into even the most everyday interactions.
Yes, for sure.
Even something like safety procedures.
It's true. And let's not forget the irony here, right?
Yeah.
This is a UFC champion.
Yeah.
Someone who's trained to deal with intense pressure.
Right.
Physical confrontations, you name it.
Totally.
And yet,
Yeah.
he's deemed unfit for the very row that's supposed to handle emergencies.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing
Right.
when you think about it that way.
It makes you wonder.
It really does.
Would the same concerns have even come up if the passenger in that seat had looked different?
Right. Yeah.
It forces us to confront these
Yeah.
uncomfortable questions
Yeah.
about how we decide who's capable
Totally.
and who we trust.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the individual level too.
It does.
Because it points to this bigger tension that always seems to be there between what passengers are allowed to do and how much authority the airline staff have.
Yeah, and where's the line?
Right.
When does a flight attendant's concern for safety turn into something that could be discriminatory?
Yeah. Yeah.
And where do we draw the line?
Right.
Between just doing what you're told
Yeah.
and standing up for yourself?
These are tough questions.
They are.
And when you look at the Reddit discussion about this whole thing, it shows just how unclear it all is.
Yeah, for sure.
You've got some users who are totally on the flight attendant side.
Right.
They're saying her main job is to keep everyone on that plane safe.
Exactly.
And that makes sense.
Yeah. Right.
They're saying that even a little hesitation from someone in the exit row could be a huge red flag. And it could put everybody at risk.
Right.
So they think Khabib should just moved.
Yeah.
Even if he thought it was unfair.
Just comply.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keep things moving.
But then you have other people who are looking at this whole thing and thinking, this is profiling.
Right.
Yeah. They're saying that the fact that he was taken off the plane, even though he said he was willing to help, shows that there's a bigger problem of bias in the airline industry.
Yeah, it's you've got these two sides flashing this tug of war between needing to communicate clearly and all these misinterpretations that can happen because of underlying societal prejudices.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is where things get even more interesting because it's not just a private argument anymore.
Right.
It becomes this public spectacle
Totally.
Fueled by social media and online commentary.
Yeah, it blows up.
Yeah.
It goes viral. Everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, it becomes this whole other thing.
It does.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this whole thing becomes a Rorschach test. Right?
It really is.
People are seeing what they want to see in the situation, interpreting it based on their own ideas about authority, about race, about air travel, the whole thing.
Exactly. And that's where social media comes in.
Yeah.
And it gets really fascinating. Because it's this amplifier it takes this small conflict and broadcasts it to the entire world. But then it also distorts everything. It breaks it up into all these competing narratives.
It's crazy how it's almost impossible to separate what really happened from what people are saying happened.
You get lost in the noise.
We're stuck with this like fragmented reality, trying to figure out what actually went down.
And the fact that there's no clear answer, no good guy or bad guy, that just makes it even more intriguing. It forces us to face the fact that human interactions are messy. That even when people have good intentions,
things can get misconstrued or have these unexpected consequences.
It's a good reminder that communication isn't just about the words we say.
That's not.
You know, it's about all the unspoken stuff.
All the assumptions, the subtle cues. The way our own biases can change how we see things.
Totally. Like, if we could rewind and play this whole thing back, could it have been avoided?
Maybe.
You know? Maybe if the flight attendant had been more empathetic, maybe if she had explained her concerns more clearly, things wouldn't have gotten so out of hand.
It's easy to play the blame game after the fact.
Oh, totally.
But when you're in that moment, with tensions running high, even the smallest miscommunication can turn into a huge conflict.
That's so true. And I think that's a good lesson for everyone.
It is.
You know? To think about how we communicate, to really listen to each other, and to ask for clarification.
When something isn't clear.
Absolutely. And those skills are important everywhere. Not just on planes. In all parts of life.
For sure. This whole thing also brings up some interesting questions about how we deal with conflict in public. On the one hand, we want passengers to feel like they can speak up if they think they're being treated unfairly.
Like, we don't want to create this environment where people are just blindly obeying and too scared to question authority.
Especially when there could be discrimination involved or someone's abusing their power.
Exactly.
But we also have to balance that with the fact that disruptive behavior on a plane can be a big problem.
Huge.
Not just for that person, but for everyone.
It's finding that balance between standing up for yourself and respecting the need for safety and order.
It's tricky.
It is.
And there's no easy answer. It all depends on the situation.
Context is everything.
Exactly. And then to make things even more complicated, you've got the whole social media aspect. It wasn't just the people on the plane who saw this. It was caught on video, shared online.
And then dissected by millions.
It's crazy.
It is. It's like this private disagreement. Suddenly becomes this huge public spectacle. A battleground for everyone's opinions and ideologies.
And that makes you think about how we consume information these days.
It does. You know, in the digital age.
It's so easy to get caught up in the outrage. And form opinions based on, like, these tiny bits of information or these emotionally charged headlines.
We forget that there's usually more to the story than what we see at first. We forget that there are multiple perspectives. And that nuance gets lost. In the rush to judge.
It does.
So critical thinking is super important.
It's crucial.
We need to be able to sift through all the noise.
And figure out what's real. Identify biases, hidden agendas, and evaluate information carefully.
Be skeptical.
It's about asking the right questions.
Exactly.
Challenging our own assumptions and being honest about what we don't know.
We can't let algorithms control how we understand the world.
Exactly. We need to actively engage with different viewpoints. Find trustworthy sources and be wary of information that just confirms what we already believe.
Absolutely. And that's especially important in a situation like this, where the stakes are high. This whole thing has implications for how we see passenger rights, how much authority airline staff have, and how bias can influence safety procedures, even when they're supposed to be objective.
It's a conversation that needs to happen.
It does.
Not just in the airline industry, but in society as a whole.
For sure. How do we make sure that safety protocols are applied fairly without resorting to profiling or discrimination?
How do we give passengers the power to stand up for themselves while also respecting the authority of the people who are supposed to keep things safe and orderly?
And maybe most importantly, how do we create a culture of empathy and understanding, even when things are tense?
These are tough questions.
They are.
And there are no easy answers.
But that's exactly why we need to talk about them.
Right.
To question our own assumptions and to try to understand the world around us in a more nuanced and compassionate way.
I think you're right. It's weird, right? We want things to be clear.
Yeah.
We want definite answers. But so often, especially when people are involved, things are just messy and complicated.
They are. And that ambiguity, it can be unsettling.
For sure.
It challenges us because we like those simple stories.
Yeah.
The ones with clear heroes and villains.
Right. But maybe this kind of situation is actually an opportunity.
I think so.
To learn and grow.
Yeah.
To understand ourselves and the world better.
Absolutely. It's like this incident.
Right.
It forces us to hold these two opposing ideas in our minds.
Right. On the one hand, we have to acknowledge that bias exists.
Yeah.
That the way we see other people can be influenced by things we're not even aware of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can't pretend that implicit bias isn't real.
Yeah.
It affects how we judge people, how we act, even in everyday situations.
But at the same time, we can't forget about safety protocols.
Right.
About the need for clear communication and respecting the authority of the people who are keeping things in order.
Especially in a situation like air travel.
Yeah, where things can get really serious.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's not about saying that the flight attendant was wrong to be concerned.
Right.
Or that her job isn't important.
It's more about understanding that even when people have good intentions, their actions can have consequences they didn't mean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those consequences can be even worse.
Yeah.
When they're based on bias or prejudice.
Yeah. It's tough, right?
It is.
Trying to find that balance between respecting people's rights and maintaining safety and order.
It's a delicate balance.
And it's easy to lose sight of that nuance.
Oh, totally.
Especially in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, or in the chaos of social media.
So it comes down to the individual.
Exactly.
The choices we make when we see something like this happen. What do we do when we think someone's being treated unfairly?
Yeah. Do we say something?
Yeah, do we step in?
Do we just stay quiet and hope someone else will do something?
It's a tough call.
It is.
It depends on the situation, on what we believe, and how much risk we're willing to take.
It's about being prepared.
Yeah.
Thinking about these things ahead of time.
Because when it happens, you don't have time to think it through.
You have to react based on your instincts and your values.
So wrapping up this deep dive, I'm kind of unsettled.
I get it.
But also, I'm thinking about how complex everything is.
Right.
You know? How complex people are.
It's a good reminder that we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
Even with the best intentions.
And our actions can have these ripple effects.
They do.
That we don't always see right away.
It's a call to action.
It is.
Have these hard conversations. Yeah. To challenge our own assumptions.
To move past those simple stories where it's easy to label people as good or bad.
To embrace the messiness.
Yeah.
The gray areas.
Like contradictions.
Yeah, and maybe through that process of really wrestling with these complexities.
Right.
We can start to understand each other better.
Yeah.
To have more empathy and compassion.
Even in a world that feels so divided?
Yeah. So imagine yourself on that plane.
What would you have done?
What would have influenced your decision?
And what does that tell you about your own values and beliefs?
We'll leave you with those questions.
Yeah, something to think about.